All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board, for the board. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to episode 33 of the KissFAQ podcast. Joining me today is Ken, 69th Blizzard on the board, Lonnie, who does not support St. Louis, but is St. Louis Kiss on the board.
Yeah, we beat you 2 out of 3 times this week.
Yeah,
so
all is
you're out of the second wild card right now.
All is not forgiven, but it is, of course. And Marcus Almighty. Mark, welcome back, gentlemen. Good to see you all on this, cloudy Friday morning. So let's jump straight into the topic today because we're talking Alive 3. And for me, it's a love-hate album. Obviously, I'm late to the Kiss show, becoming a fan in 1985. So I'd never experienced the joy of an Alive album coming out during my life until, obviously, Alive 3 came out in 1992, or 1993, innit? While I was drugged up on meds with a broken leg. So it came out, my mom visited me and brought me Alive 3, and it did not make me feel better when I compared it to the other two. So I've always wondered, did they leave it too late to release Alive 3? And that's going to be the basic premise of this discussion, is when should Kiss have released Alive 3? With the first 2 Alives following groups of 3 studio albums, would it have made sense to have done it after Creatures? Since The Elder wasn't toured for and really doesn't count to the band. So, I mean, let's jump right in. With that first question, then we'll get into some other details about the album. Ken, what's your take on it? Because obviously,
Well, my take is, they were doing 3 albums, then a live album, 3 albums, a live album. I thought they were going to do the same thing going forward, but they really couldn't. I don't think with Dynasty, Unmasked, and The Elder.
No way.
I don't think they played anything live from those except maybe I Was Made for Loving You.
2000 Man?
Yeah, 2000 Man. But
Shandy?
I thought, yes. I thought they would have, the more opportune time would have been a little later, since I wouldn't have wanted any original material that was on the other 2 live albums. That's the way they did it, right? Live 1 and Alive 2 did not have any songs on it, and I liked it that way. So I expected Live 3 to be that way. It wasn't. I was hoping it would be, maybe the opportune time would have been after Asylum. For me, that would have been the opportune time. Now, I don't know if they would be able to do a concert that they just used all those newer songs starting from, I guess, Dynasty through Asylum. But I think they would have, could have taken from different live shows where they did play some of those songs, or even those tours, pull from Dynasty tour, pull from the Creatures tour, pull from the Lick It Up tour, and so on, all the way up to Asylum, and release that as Alive 3, and then just have all the new songs.
Do you think they could have been brave enough to do like what a lot of bands do, is take recordings from different years? I think Guns N' Roses put out Live. I can't remember what the album was called. Yeah, so they took a whole bunch of different eras and combined it into one live album. Motley Crue's Entertainment or Death, of course, was the same kind of model. Could Kiss have done that to have gotten it?
Rush did it too with Show of Hands.
Did they, for that one?
Yeah.
Good call.
It's possible. I would have liked to have seen, all of Eric Carr on all the tracks versus pulling a 79 track with Peter's diminishing drumming at that point. But I would have liked it all live with Eric Carr, get his due.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, and I don't know how revisionist I'm being to myself, but, becoming a fan in 85, and then them saying that we're going to take a year off to, wait for Ron Nevison to do Crazy Nights, I always felt like, even back then, it was an ideal time to throw something out there. I was I had notebooks, writing down the song titles and the albums and all that. And I'm like, well, there's going to be a gap here. They got to release something. So even before I think of Eric Carr, I think of they should have just put something out in '86 to kind of tide you over when, we had Animalize Live Uncensored come out. An album version of that, if nothing. But Lonnie, what's your take?
Yeah, they had the formula of the three studio and then the live album. And, it with Kiss waning in their popularity at the time after the Creatures of the Night tour, I really don't think it would have worked at that point in time because of where the band was, and they were really going through a crisis at the time of what's our next move, because we really just failed on a tour in the United States. Yeah, we had success down in South America, but it really wasn't the right time to capitalize on something like a live album, and I think it just would have really fallen short. I think the timing, and I think this is the most fun thing to discuss about Kiss Alive 3 is the timing of the album. And a lot of people weren't happy that when it came out in '93 that, well, why should Eric Singer be featured on a live Kiss album? He's only done one proper tour with the band at this point. Bruce had been around for quite a while by then, but and you're still fresh off the death of Eric Carr. It's still pretty fresh in your mind, especially when it was 2 years later, but when you thought about Kiss, you would still think about Eric Carr being gone. And the fact that Eric didn't get his proper due in being featured on a live Kiss album was really a shame in a lot of fans' eyes, because Eric was incredible. I never got the opportunity to see Eric live, but Eric is an incredibly live drummer, and he's just fantastic behind the kit, and really gave Kiss a new life when he came into the fold. So I think the more opportune time to release an Alive 3 would have been, there is the good gap right there between Animalize and between Asylum and Crazy Nights. There's really nothing there just to keep the band visually, and just keep the band in the eyes at your record store. Because you gotta remember, record stores were what's the place to go at the time. Even if you weren't going to buy anything, you just go and hang out. Oh, look, there's a new Kiss release, just for the sake of going. I remember just going to the record store as a kid, and just to even if I wasn't going to buy anything, and just go there and just look around for an hour, and that's something that's really lost today. But I think that, the other one too is right after Animalize, and using that show from Detroit as an Alive 3 would have been better than where they ended up doing it. I know the production of that, maybe people don't like the production. That Julian made a face when I said that, but the band sounds a little different there than what we're used to, what we think Kiss should sound like live. But
sound like the Bloody Chipmunks. And playing so fast.
And to echo what Ken was saying, that I really liked as a kid when I'm like Julian, I didn't, experience Alive 1 coming out, and I didn't experience Alive 2 coming out. I went back and bought them. And I liked the fact that, there wasn't repeats on those two albums. And it was a shame that, we'll get into the track listing on that later, I guess, but I liked that. And that I bought Alive 1. I got all these live versions of these songs, and Alive 2 I have all these live versions of these songs. I think Alive 3 should have followed the same formula, in that you would have gotten a lot of live versions of these 80s songs. And if it had been released earlier than when it was in '93, the set list would have been more conducive for an album like that, when they were basically playing a lot of those 80s songs before they went back and started revisiting old songs from the catalog. So I would like to have seen it come out maybe after Animalize and before Asylum, around in that period.
What about in the little gap following Eric Carr's death? Wasn't that like a really missed opportunity to honor him?
I got that written down too, actually. I think like one of those Detroit shows from the Hot in the Shade tour would have been an excellent time to do it. Just, you could call it a live 3, properly dedicate the album to Eric Carr as opposed to just a blurb in the bottom of Revenge that it's dedicated to Eric Carr, and really make the album about Eric Carr. You could put on the drum solo from one of those shows and, really feature him as a drummer and celebrate him and what he contributed to the band from 1980 to 1991. That, I think, other than, like I said, after Animalize, I think that would actually be my second choice, is after Hot in the Shade, to bridge the gap to before Revenge and just to celebrate Eric Carr and all his accomplishments.
Totally. Marcus, what's your takes on this so far?
Well, I'm going to approach this from a view that people are going to probably rub me for the wrong way, I guess, of course, again. But
we don't need
I think that the gap between Asylum and Creatures of the Night would have been the smart place to do it. But, of course, this is being Kiss, so they're not going to do the smart thing, obviously. They're going to, they're going to miss the opportunity, like they always miss other things around that time. So they let that go. Personally, I think the best time to do it would have been right after Hot in the Shade, because Hot in the Shade was the tour where they came back. Everything was starting to roll for them. The shows were starting to fill up again. Everybody was on the Kiss bandwagon again. I mean, Paul Stanley was more than happy to say in all their shows, he would keep announcing what the attendances were at his shows. We had 12,000 here last year, and this year we got 100 more than last time. So he was kind of hyping that all the time, that they were on a roll, and, they were playing really well. I thought that was one of the best tours I've seen. Like, I didn't see it personally, like, in concert, but I mean, on the bootlegs I've seen, it was definitely awesome. But, again, just like in old Kiss history, they missed the boat again. Little late to the show, as usual. They do it on, Revenge instead of doing it in Hot in the Shade, which is, again, them taking a good idea, but of course being a year late with everything as usual. So I think they should have did it in Hot in the Shade. I mean, like you said as well, that it would have been a nice tribute to Eric Carr had they have done it then too. I think that would have also, probably helped it sell a bit more too, being a tribute to him, that they made a record with him on it. As far as the, you guys talking about the track listing with, being all new songs on it, which you guys would have wanted. I just don't think that would have worked, because frankly, the 80s material in Kiss fans' eyes is just nowhere near as strong as the stuff from the Makeup days. So, and they acknowledge that with that set list in that tour, because look at how much of the stuff they started putting back in from the old stuff. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with doing that. I mean, as long as the set flows and the record is strong, then who cares if they put in Detroit Rock City or if they put in I Stole Your Love? Frankly, I would have loved to have them put in I Stole Your Love first on that. It would have been awesome. They played it really well, and why not put it in? But frankly, I think that they should have did it right after Hot in the Shade. It would have been a perfect tribute to Eric Carr, and I think that it would have been a much better idea for an Alive 3 than the one with Eric Singer.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say I agree with you, and I felt that, in 89, 90, in the Hot in the Shade era, it suddenly felt like Kiss were back on top. You're looking in the rock mags, and, there are these awesome pictures of that tour. There was Paul looking like leadership material again, instead of like a circus freak, and Gene for that matter as well. Come on, those 80s looks, were not, very, very good in hindsight, or even at the time for that matter. So Hot in the Shade tour, they're reinvigorated, and obviously we can say a lot of that does come down to the 70s material that came back into the set, but they also had a really good balance. I mean, I've been looking through some of the sets, to compare, these tours, and when I thought that the live album would have made the most sense, and Hot in the Shade, I mean, they could never have done another kind of like Alive 2 format where all the songs had not been released live before. Because, come on, that idea was on its last legs on Alive 2, when they're having to throw in stuff like Tomorrow and Tonight, which to me is just filler. They never did perform it live, so it's fake at that point. It's already done. And I mean, we know the contractual reasons for Live 2 Side 4, but, you know, I think they needed a pure live album, and 89 is probably the best set. I listened to Animalize live, and yeah, I made that face, because that's not Kiss, to me. You know, even though it was my Kiss at the time, I just absolutely abhor that video. I like the stage, you know, that's cool, but I don't like the performances, I don't like the speed, the tempo, or the sound. So, Hot in the Shade.
A little too hyped up.
Yeah, Hot in the Shade would have been the best time, or, you know, even coming off Crazy Nights. That was a big worldwide tour. I mean, that was bigger in the world than it was in North America. The downside, of course, would be that it would have included Bang Bang You on an album for a second time, and I don't think I can think of anything worse than that.
No.
Maybe a live performance of My Way. You know, just have all the windows in the cars in the parking lot shattering as Paul hits those notes.
The Frank Sinatra version, right?
Yeah, if only. I'd take that any day. So, I mean, that's another gap. That would have made, you know, if they'd done it in 88, say, instead of, you know, putting out, let's put the, yeah. That, I mean, and if we're going to revise history, yeah, revise those two songs away. But, I don't, I'm just going to find my notes.
I kind of agree with you guys. That was my second choice, is right after Hot in the Shade, because that was just a great, you know, they were kind of back on track at that point. And it was a great show. I mean, I was at the show myself, and of course we've seen it on video. And they missed the opportunity there with the album. I mean, they could have had the album was folded open and had the, this is what I imagined, you had the folding open of the album, and what happens is, you know, like those books when you're a kid?
Yeah.
You have a pop-ups. You have pop-ups.
The Sphinx.
So what? The Sphinx pops up behind, and then the members pop up in front of them playing, you know, with the guitar.
Sure.
I said, oh, that'd be a cool little thing.
Well, can you rephrase that slightly from the members pop up, because that just doesn't sound right.
The members of KISS.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I shouldn't even say that.
Actually, that would make a badass gatefold, a totally badass one. I mean, if you look at the gatefold of Alive 2, and all the design of albums was downhill after the originals era, kind of. You know, to have a pop up with Leon or the stage, you know, even not going 3-dimensional like you suggest, just you take the best pictures that they take of the Hot in the Shade tour with the lasers, what is it, the water thing running across the front, the backdrop, and the band. I mean, that remains impressive to me. But do we all agree that Alive 3 really should have been an Eric Carr album? Marcus?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think just in hindsight, I think the problem with if they would have tried to have done it after Crazy Nights, I think the problem there was just too much craziness happening with the whole management being changed, and they didn't even seem too into it at that point. I mean, I kept reading stories about them having short sets and just trying to get it over and done with at that point. So I don't think they were really into it at that point to make a live record. So I think that would have been probably a non-starter there. But I still think Hot in the Shade would have been the right time.
So they released Heaven's on Fire, the live version from Detroit '84, as a B-side in, I think, most non-North American markets. I think it was the Tears Are Falling single. I mean, what are you guys' thoughts of Animalize Live Uncensored? Would that have made a decent Alive 3 had they taken that next step and not just done it as a video? And what year did that come out in a video? Was that 85 or 86? Whatever. But, Lonnie.
Yeah, I mean, those what I mentioned earlier would have been one of my first choices for it, right there at that Detroit show. I think.
Would you take that? You would take that show as it stands?
I would take it, you know, virtually as it stands. That's what the band sounded like at the time. Bruce was in the band. They were establishing Bruce as the new guitar player, and yeah, it would have been maybe almost the same. Well, not even the same thing with Eric Singer not playing on. I mean, Bruce hadn't played. I mean, officially, yeah, he was in the studio for Animalize and that, but not officially. It would have been Bruce's first official album if they would have put it out there before Asylum. But, and I think the band was gaining some traction at the time, too, after the Heaven's on Fire single, after the Lick It Up single, the album before, and they were beginning to gain some traction back into the mainstream in America. I think that could have been a decent time to do it, considering what was going on musically at the time, to put out a live album to kind of almost celebrate, that we're back. And going back to, a set list in that, they were playing quite a bit off of Creatures at the time, off of Animalize at the time, and Lick It Up at the time, going back to new songs on a live album. You could have gotten, quite a few new tracks on a Kiss album as opposed to what we got on Alive 3. You have 5 songs that were on the other ones, or 4 songs that are on its predecessor, and 5 songs off Revenge. I love Revenge, but 5 songs off of one album when you didn't have any off of. You only had one off of Hot and Shade, one off of Lick It Up, one off Animalize. You could have gotten a better sample of songs if you would have done it then off of Animalize and off of Lick It Up and off of Creatures. I think you would have gotten a better mix of tracks if you would have done it at that time. And I think the band sounded good at the time too. You go back and listen to that. Yeah, if the production's a little different, it's not what we're used to Kiss sounding like. But they were really tight with Bruce and Eric in the band at the time in that era.
Ken, what's your take on Animalize Live Uncensored?
Yeah, it was good at the time. I mean, I remember at least watching that a lot at the time, and I enjoyed it. It was just the sound and what it was it was the time where things sounded like that, and all these bands were coming out. They were playing, maybe faster. That's why Kiss turned up the speed a little bit there. So it was just kind of sign of the times. And though I remember, I know I have it somewhere, but it's a CD, a live. I don't know if it was a bootleg or something that came out. Kiss Live was like radio something, and it was from the Animalize tour, and it was pretty good quality. And I was listening to it, and I remember it was pretty good. So that would have worked. It still would have worked. You thought with the video, you probably should have released the CD anyway. If you're going to release the long form video in concert, you might as well release it on CD also. It just didn't make sense for them not to do that. But I still would have rather them waited a little bit longer, either, like I said, after Asylum or after Hot in the Shade is the other choice.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the Animalize tour wasn't the monster success, but it was. The album is purportedly the highest selling studio album of the 1980s, so there's no stats to really back that up with, but it's always been suggested that it was close to being double platinum at one point. The Only Smashes is certified at that point. So on one hand, it seems that it would have made sense, like you just said, if you're releasing it on video and Laserdisc, why isn't there an audio companion of that show? And when I started thinking about this topic, I was like, but that show's so short. But in song wise, it's only 2 songs less than Alive 3 as released. So it's got a pretty good mix of kind of the core material from the 80s that you'd want to hear live, or at least I want to hear live. I mean, Creatures of the Night, Heaven's on Fire, Thrills in the Night, I Can Leave, Under the Gun, yeah, awesome. And to hear them at pretty close to as they were from the studio at the time. So and of course the pair, I Love It Loud and I Still Love You, with Eric Carr on drums.
Right.
So that I do like. Mark.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have any issue as far as the show itself. I mean, other than the fact that, yeah, they did kind of play this in hyper speed mode. But I think that has a bit to do with the fact that, number one, they knew, that they were filming it. And number two, I also, from what I remember, I'm pretty sure they said that they were doing a radio simulcast of that show at the same time. And usually when a band hears that something like that's happening, there's extra adrenaline going on. You're excited. Things were starting to pick up for them again a bit more. So, the excitement's probably in the air for them. Yay, maybe we're getting back up. The people are reconnecting. So, hence, I think that usually puts in a little bit more of the faster tempo and the excitement, that comes back with that sort of thing. The set list, it's like you said, it's a good combination of the songs that were out at the time. I mean, for me personally, maybe I would have liked to see maybe one or two more older, like makeup ones, but that's neither here nor there. But I think when I have released that, I don't know. I think it's good, but I don't know. I could have did this or did without this, to be quite honest. I mean, it's just not something that I watch very often, and it's not really my favorite era of Kiss, to be honest with you. But it's not bad. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than that. I mean, it's not a bad release. It's just, like you said, I just don't get the same vibe or feel off of this kind of a show that I did off like the Hot in the Shade. The Hot in the Shade stuff made me feel more like Kiss was back. This, to me, didn't really. This still kind of made me feel like they were still kind of floundering a bit and were finding their footing again, as far as I was concerned.
Lonnie.
Yeah. I don't know. I like that show, but I think it would have been a good fit right there. But I know what you're saying. Mark. That maybe they weren't quite ready yet at that point. They're still gaining ground in America. But I go back to kind of what you guys were saying too about the Hot in the Shade. I think that would have been the ideal time as far as timing goes. And maybe I don't know. I mean, maybe you do an Alive 3 after Animalize, and maybe you do an Alive 4 after Hot in the Shade. They prided themselves on the live albums, and when Alive 3 came out, I was really excited for it because, like Julian, I hadn't experienced the release of a live Kiss album, so I was really excited for it, and I was happy with it at the time. I think I was really happy with what it was, and I think when I go back and listen to it now, especially after seeing a lot of the Revenge shows, not only the Detroit show, but some of the other ones too, it doesn't really represent to me what the band really sounded like at that time. And, it's missing. There's quite a bit missing from Alive 3. Just throw out the hypothetical of when it could have came out, when it didn't come out. From what we got in 1993, there's a lot missing off of that could have been on that from that Revenge show. A staple in that lineup with War Machine was a highlight of the show, with the Statue of Liberty's face crumbling and the change of the set. And it's War Machine. It's a great Kiss song. It's loved by a lot of fans, and that's missing on it. And it really always kind of had me puzzled that why'd you leave that off? It's not on either of the Alives before. So there's not that reason out there. And it was a major part of the set. It was really kind of blew me away that wasn't on there. And you're missing Shout It Out Loud from the encore. You're missing Love Gun. You're missing some of the real staple Kiss songs. So you're gonna go ahead and throw Deuce on there, and you're gonna throw Rock and Roll Night on there. What's wrong with throwing Shout It Out Loud and Love Gun on there at that point if you're already gonna put those on there? I'm talking too much. Julian left.
I'm sorry, what was that? No, I totally agree with you on that. Look at Alive 3, the international version, and was it the LP, 17 songs, because they may take it off the freaking bonus. Look at Kissology 2, and the Detroit 1990, sorry. Revenge in Dayton, which to me is one of the superior bootlegs from the Revenge tour. That's 27 songs. I mean, sure, Alive would fit on one CD. There's no reason for it to be on two. Alive 2 would fit on one CD, so we can understand the economics of keeping it to one CD. But the amount of fat that was trimmed off what is an incredible set list. I mean, come on, Kiss performing 27 songs is just mind-blowing these days when we're struggling to get 15 out of them. You know, and what Lonnie said, yeah, look at the stuff that is not on there. You know, it's staggering. Mark.
Well, another thing actually though that I was kind of confused about is on one of the Kissology releases, they had a bonus disc that was that show in South America that they did when they brought the Sphinx set, right?
How odd that you mentioned that.
And that one I thought would have been a really good one to maybe even have like as the video, like for Kissalize, because I thought that was a really good. I love that show. I thought they played really good. I thought that they had all the attitude, everything was there, and I really liked that show. I don't know why they didn't. You know, I know they put it out in the Kissology, but why they didn't actually make that the show to put out for the Alive 3 instead of the one that they did? I mean, I thought that was a better show. Just me personally, I don't know if you guys think the same way, but you know, what do you guys think?
You know, I agree with you, but that's obviously because we're Asylum fans.
Well,
but that
well, after the fact though, it shows in '94.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's in '94 doesn't matter to me. As Alive 3, as you know, it's pretty much the same material.
Right.
You know, the show, I would rather rip this to a CD and call that My Alive 3 any day of the week. Number one, the performance. Number two, the set list. And you're just trying to say it before I get to say it. The sound, right?
Yeah.
Take it, Lonnie, from there. You know, it sounds way better. You know, that's my biggest complaint of Alive 3 as released. It sounds like shit. It sounds like it's been neutered. It's sonically flat. It has absolutely no real power. I mean, Bruce's guitar, if you think of how fantastic he is on the Revenge album, those grinding but crystal clear guitars, on Alive 3, for me, there's no character to the sound. And
which makes me believe more and more that I think Eddie Kramer's involvement with it is very minimal. I mean, Eddie Kramer is known for some pretty ballsy production and guitars, and that to me just doesn't seem like an Eddie Kramer production. I know we've talked about it once before. Somebody in one of the episodes saying that he kind of made a comment that he just almost was hinting that he wasn't really involved in as much as we think he probably is, right?
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case, that he probably wasn't. And I mean, there's notes of his. I mean, he went to several shows and took notes of this and that on the performances for it. But you know, there's not much in there, is there?
No.
It's just it's lacking the energy that, to me, it's just lacking the energy that you get out of like watching that Dayton show, or I have like a Cleveland show. Oh, look, my phone's going off. I don't know what's going on.
Guess who?
And the Cleveland show, the Dayton show, and that South America show just had so much more energy. And the Detroit show too. Just watch that Detroit show that's on Kissology, and it just has so much more energy than what's translated onto the album itself. You know, and like I love to run. I'm a big runner. I love to run the music, and even I love running to Alive. It's a great album to run to. It's so full of energy. I can't run to Alive 3 because it just it doesn't get me moving. It doesn't get me going. I have to do something else. I can't run to Alive 3. It just doesn't have it. It doesn't. It's just so lacking, in my opinion. And I listen to it so infrequently. I actually had to really go back and listen to it this week before we did the show, because it doesn't. I mean, I like the fact that it has 5 Revenge songs on it, but it doesn't. It's not. It's just not a good representation of what the band sounded like in 1992. I mean, you listen to that. You go watch that show from South America in '94. It's on Kissology 3. That's what that lineup to me sounded like and looked like, and energy-wise, and just everything. That's what Kiss was. That's the perfect representation of Kiss in that era, and not what came out on CD at the time to showcase the band. It was really disappointing.
Ken, what's your take on the Sonics? I mean, obviously you saw them in the clubs, which is on the Revenge tour, right?
Yeah, I did. I saw.
Which obviously you're not going to replicate in a concert or on a CD, and is a completely different beast. But what's your take on how a Live 3 sounds?
Yeah, when I got a Live 3, I remember it's like, well, this doesn't sound like what I was listening to when I saw them either in the club or on the Revenge tour in Oakland. It was too much. I think trying to put too much in your face with the sounds. It's like just total distortion, overload on their guitars. So, like Marcus was saying about the clarity and so on, it's not there. Or maybe it was you, Julian. Maybe everybody has the same opinion, I think, on it. It's just too much in your face, too much distortion. And again, I have a hard time listening to it today. It's hard to listen to. I can go back to the other Live 1 and 2, no problem. But that one's a real hard listen. I don't want to continue listening. I'll just go to some other album or whatever. But yeah, it's too much. And I don't think, like Mark was saying, Eddie Kramer. That is not an Eddie Kramer sounding production, in my opinion. I've never heard him do anything like that. So I think it's a Paul Stanley production, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and probably a Paul Stanley budget, half-assed production.
Yeah,
it feels rushed and it feels distracted. So I'm not trying to not throw Paul under the bus for the album, but I just think there's probably mitigating factors. I went back and listened to the Live 3 CD, and I'm like, this is crap. So pulled out the HD Tracks version. It's no better. I mean, so there's no way to polish that diamond or polish that turd. It's just going to stay that way. What I will say is Detroit on Kissology 3 is what I've been listening to this morning right before we've come on. And maybe because it's visual and I'm seeing more of the crowd, you're seeing the motion, maybe, that's making my brain happier. And it's obviously a different, version of the recording without whatever else was done to make a Live 3. I think that is a far better Live 3 for what it is. I mean, how many? I just got to count the songs quickly. It's the same amount of songs. So, but you also get Parasite and Watching You. So obviously, I'm going to be completely biased with those two songs in there. What do you think of that? I mean, how is Detroit on Kissology for you guys as an Live 3? Lonnie.
Very good. Going back to earlier, I mean, I think that the Detroit show and like that San Paulo show from '94, they're just so good at what that band was in '93, '94. Kind of like what Daniel has said when he's been on here too, that he was, disappointed almost when the reunion tour happened because the band was actually sounding so good in in the shows off the Revenge tour and like the shows that took place afterward on the few electric shows that they played after the Revenge tour, and I, to a certain extent I was too, because I was, I didn't get to see the Revenge tour and I just wanted to see that Revenge lineup just because it sounded so great and they had so much energy, and I knew when the reunion tour happened, well, we're never going to go backwards. We're not going to go back to that again. That ship has sailed at that point. So yeah, that Detroit show on Kissology is just the perfect representation. And it's too bad that it's like the production on Live 3 is the way it is, and we just couldn't take more of just the raw recording and just put it on the disc and be done with it instead of hyping in the crowd noise behind it and everything else that they did to the production, instead of just let it be a live Kiss recording and just let it go. You listen to that and it's like, well, what do you really need to polish up on this? It sounds so good and the band sounds so tight live. Why mess with it? Why do to it what you did? I don't understand that.
Yeah, certainly.
What do you guys think?
Ken?
Well, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. I think they could have released that just as the quality's good enough from Kissology. It would have been nice if they had figured it out at the time and decided to record that for the Alive, 3 at the time, and it would have been even better than what we're hearing on, on Kissology. So it would have been good either way. For me, it's a great show. Just listening to it, the visuals are great, of course, on the Kissology, but it's really, if you don't have the music to back it, who cares about the visuals, right? So it's a good musical document that they could have put out.
Mark?
Well, honestly, I agree with you guys. I think the Detroit show is way better. I mean, I think one of the things that is really interesting about this whole thing is that we're talking about how the sonics of the album is not very good, and I think it's there again shows the reason why you get somebody like Eddie Kramer, because I mean, Live 1, as much as people like it or hate it, that to me sounds like a live record. I mean, as much as it's a overdubbed work, but he knows how to make records sound good in that capacity, even if it's not totally, live works. I mean, it's an interesting thing because one year I went to Chicago to work on something with a producer. I'm sure you guys know him, Neil Kernan. He's done a bunch of stuff with Priest and Queensryche and stuff like that. And he worked on Judas Priest's Unleashed in the East. And he told me a really interesting story about how the vocals had to be replaced on that record because Rob Halford had some kind of strep throat or problem with his voice. And he pretty much had to redo it all. And what he pretty much did is he threw him on a porch in the backyard of the studio, put a monitor in front of him, gave him a Shure 58 mic and said, re-sing it to just the music. And he re-sung it out there in one take. Apparently, this is unbelievable, like listening to these stories that he was telling me about the making of this record. But I mean, that's the thing. To make, whether that's not regarded as a live album in people's eyes, Eddie Kramer and these people are hired to do these records for a reason, because they know how to make a record that's pleasing to people's ears and they want to buy, right? Obviously, Paul Stanley at that point doesn't have the know-how yet to do that, and it shows on Alive 3, right? I mean, it's still a decent album, but it wouldn't be as good as if Eddie was a fully involved member of that production, And that's my one grime with it. I mean, obviously, they would have been better off to just take the raw audio from the Detroit show, from the Kissology, and use that as a release. To me, it would have been better than what they did with the album. To be honest with you, I like it better. I mean, even like I know we were talking about the club shows. One of my friends went to the Toronto club show for the Revenge Club dates. And he told me, he goes, if you get a chance, grab it and check it out. And I got it from when I went to one of the conventions. And, the audio is a little shaky because it's, a handheld video camera microphone. But it was just awesome. And I mean, imagine a board tape of something like that. I mean, even though, it probably wouldn't be as good as maybe like the Detroit show, but even something like that, some of these board tapes sound phenomenal, I mean, a little tweaking here and there, a little bit of mastering here and there, and you can make it pretty decent and probably more authentic sounding than what we got with Alive 3. I think that's the main thing, is that people kind of heard Alive 3, and by that point we're like, I'm not buying it. His raps are not the same in the show that, we, like, even people that went to the Detroit show, I went to a convention, and the guy was showing the bootleg of that show. People were already commenting there saying, I don't remember him saying that, like, compared to the live album, saying, that's what he said at the show. Why didn't he say why is he saying what he's saying on the album? It doesn't compute, So I think people kind of clued in by that point already, that this is a highly worked over album, right? So I think that's just the main problem with it. They would have just kept it as is a bit more, then I think people would have dug it a bit better.
I think they missed the boat when in 2006, they released the Alive 1975 to 2000 box set. That would have been a great opportunity. If you think of the tinkering that they did to put Alive and Alive 2 on a single CD, Alive 3, well, that is probably the best sounding version of Alive 3. It's just, it doesn't have any scope to go any further, but it certainly sounds better than the original CD. Had they replaced that CD with the audio from what they released the following year on Kissology, I mean, it would have made it a lot more appealing as a package, because then, of course, you get the Alive 4 Millennium Concert, which should have...
No thanks.
Well, that's almost a show unto itself, but I will say this.
Yeah, we'll say that's a show.
Since they released Alive 4 on vinyl, back in its proper sequence and all that, I actually think that's not as bad as I once thought when I first heard the Millennium Concert. So, enough on that. But getting back to Alive 3, the Alive franchise has been on a downward trajectory to me. I mean, you start off in 75 with Alive, and God bless those people who got to buy that album when it was new, when it was on the shelves, because, oh my God, as a late to the party fan, I mean, I've only been a fan for 30 years, Jesus, but right. you did miss those first 10 years when they won 5 World Series or something, to Alive 2, I mean, Alive 2 is not Alive. I mean, the material, the filler, and then you really take a nadir down to Alive 3, and from Lonnie's obvious expression a moment ago, Alive 4 is subterranean. It was a downward trajectory for the live album, so I don't see how Alive 3 could really ever have lived up to expectations when you're measuring it against such monsters as Alive and Alive 2. Thoughts on that? I mean, was it always going to be a doomed kind of live effort? Was there anything that could have saved it and made it appealing? Lonnie?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to live up to, especially at that point in time, especially by the time 93 rolls around, and Alive 1 and Alive 2 have been held in such high esteem amongst Kiss fans by that point. I mean, they were just untouchable in Kiss fans' eyes by that point. And, it's almost impossible to live up to the reputation that Alive and Alive 1 have gotten amongst not only rock fans, but amongst Kiss fans. And, it was almost a nearly impossible task for the band to achieve. It's kind of like, when Guns N' Roses released Use Your Illusion, well, how is it going to stand up to Appetite? Well, it couldn't stand up to Appetite, and the same reflection with Alive 3. It can't stand up to Alive 1 and Alive 2. It just can't, because even if Alive 3 had better production, or if it was closer to that Detroit show, just the way it sounded, I still think people would say, well, it's still not as good as Alive and Alive 2, just because of the reputation those albums had gotten, especially by that point. And even to this day, the reputation those two albums have of being just the standard for live albums and standard for Kiss, that it was nearly impossible of a task. Even if Eddie Kramer was more involved on it, even if it would have been just straight that Detroit show, people still would have had a problem with it. One being that, and I remember when it came out too, people had a problem with it. Well, Kiss shouldn't be releasing a live album that isn't Kiss in makeup. Kiss in makeup is what live albums for Kiss are. And I don't know if you guys remember hearing that. I remember hearing people grumbling about that oh, no, you can't do that. Kiss Alive is a makeup standard. You can't do that. And, there were people Kiss fans love to argue with one another and love to grumble about certain things. So, I think that it was Alive as a franchise was too big for Alive 3 to live up to the hype no matter.
Ken?
Well, yeah, Live 1 and Live 2, you can't, it's going to be hard to match up to that. Still, they missed the boat. Again, I still think they should have released all, unreleased songs from the first two. The production should have been more, you should have had some airspace in between the instruments. It was just too much in your face, the production. I don't know. I'm hoping that they do a live. Where are we up to a live? We haven't had a 5 yet, right?
No live 5.
So I would hope they would do a live 5. That's maybe if they're recording all the the Kiss Cruise shows, their live performances they've done over the years. Ooh. I'm assuming that they've recorded those.
Well, I hope so.
So I'm hoping that they release something there. Maybe they can put like a live 5, and a lot of those gems that they're singing there that they've never played live, and put that out in some form, Yeah, just Alive 3 is not going to live up to the other two. I mean, Alive 2 was my first Kiss album, so you're going to have a hard time living up to, that for me. Even though I go back, I listened to Alive 2 first, and then I went back to Alive 1, and I thought, oh, holy, this was really, this is even better than Alive 2. It's more of a real live performance feel, like Lonnie was, saying. So, it's gonna be a hard time. Anything coming after it, even now, it's gonna be a hard time. It's a hard time living up to the original 6 albums. So it's all done. They'd have to do something spectacular to match those 70s albums or live albums.
They never can match it, but in terms of what Alive 4 was, Alive Millennium, they really need Alive 5 to be redemption. Just they need to undo the blot of those 2 albums, Mark.
Honestly, I think the one thing that we all seem to forget about this is that number one, like we all said, it can never match Alive 1 and Alive 2, and I think that's for one very big reason that we haven't mentioned yet, is that Kiss doesn't have somebody, holding the torch for Kiss anymore. Like there's no more, Neil Bogart, who was really supporting them and rallying their whole thing out there. And same with when they had Jesus, why did I keep forgetting his name? Bill Coyne. Like these 2 people were paramount in getting the hype machine going for this thing. I mean, when Alive 1 came out, I mean, they were putting up billboards everywhere, or Alive 2 when it came out, there was so much promotion going on. I mean, now under the banner of Universal Music, I mean, we're very lucky to even get even an ad here and there or a mention on the radio that Kiss is releasing anything anymore. I mean, it wasn't like it was back then. Times have changed. I mean, Kiss is not as important to these labels anymore as they once were, and certainly not as important as they were to Bogart and Casablanca, right? So, I mean, that's when Alive 1 and Alive 2 came out. Now Alive 3's out under the big, huge, mighty, manufacturing company of, Universal Music. How many acts do they have on there? Like 10 gazillion. So, I mean, Kiss is in amongst that. So I can't imagine them diverting a lot of their promotional funds to their stuff. I mean, to them, they probably, look at them as something that's on the way out, right? So think about it. I mean, even if they make a Kiss, I mean, believe me, I want them to do a really great next Alive album. And I think your idea, Ken, is a great idea. I think they should make it off of the Kiss cruises, compile all the best performances, make a really awesome live album based out of that. Because, I mean, some of the songs I've seen them do, like when they dressed up in the Dress to Kill outfits and they played the set like that, some of those songs they did were really good. And why not release something like that? I mean, it would be great. Even a companion video with that, with some of the shows that they did from the cruises, would be fantastic. And the Kiss fans, I think, would love it and they would buy it. I mean, sure. But we got to remember, this is not 1978 anymore, and Kiss is not as important to the world as they once were, unfortunately. And like I said, I think it mainly has to do with they don't have a Neil Bogart in their corner anymore to help get this and put it out there and make them sound as over the top and important to the world as people thought they were, because he was making them that way,
Are you suggesting that Chip Magoo is no Bill Coyne? or Neil Bogart? Yeah, and I agree totally with that. That it's a different time, it's a different place. The ship has sailed into the suns, blah, blah, blah. I like the idea of compiling a lot of the songs from the Kiss cruises. That kind of makes sense, which means maybe in 2025 we can do an episode about how they missed the boat on doing that, because I really don't see that happening.
No pun intended on the right. Missing the boat.
Even if they have recordings, I just don't see them doing that, for the obvious reason that it's just too obvious.
Yeah.
I would almost expect,
You know,
maybe a Kiss Alive X, the X Factor. Go back and do it the Entertainment and Death way. Take the recordings. I'm looking at that King Biscuit broadcast from '84. That's up on Wolfgang's. I mean, you got Give Me More, All Hell's Breaking Loose. Songs that have not been released live, that have been aired in a live format. I'm pretty sure they could put together the X Factor of Kiss Live performances of all these songs.
And there's quite a few, like on those Rock the Nation lives, instant lives that they did too, with All the Way, and with Lover All I Can, and there's a Tears Are Falling that they did. There's a few times that they did that. There's a lot of stuff out there like that. I mean, going back to what you're saying about, Alive 3, the Revenge, the Detroit show. Why didn't they just release it just as is? By the time 2004 comes around, they have the balls just to, with the lineup that they have, to release the show immediately after it's done. And those, the sound on those, some people I know have a problem with some of the sound on those instant lives and that, but that was a really fun time for me to go and get as many of those as I could, and hear like the different song each, they rotate a song in and out. That was really good, even with that lineup. And, the Revenge lineup is just as strong, in my opinion, that, by the time 2004 comes around, you have the guts to just put out the show immediately for people to go out and buy. And, going back to the Detroit show, it's too bad they just didn't say, you know what, that was great. Just put it out as is.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on the Rock the Nation. I mean, and they recorded them with the same gear, presumably. Mm-hmm. They'd have a pretty similar setup. I'm pretty sure they could go back and make a live album out of that, even though the tour was a failure, financially.
Also, it's Revenge tours.
Yeah, so I'm trying to count the number of songs, and there's a hell of a lot of songs
there's a ton
that were performed in 2004. I mean, you mentioned them, but you also mentioned Tears Are Falling, and that brings me to kind of one of a couple of closing questions about Alive 3. What is the song or songs that you think are most missing from Alive 3? For me, Tears Are Falling. Obviously it had been something of a very minor hit. And since it was performed during the tour, it seems to be a major omission from the album. But Lonnie, what would be your song or songs that you most wanted to have on Alive 3 that aren't there?
Obviously Tears Are Falling, and going back to Kiss trying to, between Alive albums, what's missing since Alive 2 to Alive 3 that should be captured on a live album? Like it or not, like the song or not, Crazy Nights isn't on there, and I think that wasn't a huge hit for him, but it was a substantial enough hit for him, and got enough radio play and enough play on MTV that why isn't Crazy Nights on there, Tears Are Falling on there, and earlier, like I said, War Machine, that not being on there that's still mind blowing to me that War Machine isn't on there. But those three, in my opinion, are just really head scratchers why they aren't on there, especially trying to capture an era in between live albums. And Parasite, too, for that matter, even though it's on a live one.
Yeah, but you could...
A version of Parasite with Bruce and Eric. Awesome.
You just can't go wrong with that. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I have to totally agree with Lonnie. I mean, I think that the Tears Are Falling, I mean, why that's not on there is... I don't understand it. And I think I remember on might have been a podcast episode where they were playing a bootleg version of it from a show where Paul Stanley goes and says that they're going to play it tonight, and that if they play it good tonight, then it might make it on the record. And they played it, and you listened to it, and I thought it was a really good version of it. Why didn't end up using it? I mean, who knows? Maybe there was a technical issue. Maybe something went wrong somewhere with the tape, or who knows what. But I mean, from the bootleg that I heard from that show, it sounded like a good performance. There was no muck-up. Nobody made any errors. So why that wasn't on there, who knows? I mean, like you said, too, I think Parasite should have been on there, too. That's a great song, and I love the way they did it with Bruce and with Eric. It was just so much more punchier and just so much heavier, and just the way they played. I mean, I know Ace always said, they don't play it right because they don't play it as sloppily as him at the beginning, right? But big deal. I think it's better the way Bruce does it, to be honest. But I've always been a big Bruce fan anyway. So, but that's those two really stand out as being songs that are missing from it. I mean, like, I agree too. War Machine should have been on there. They played it during a tour. Why wasn't it on there, right? But I mean, to me, the biggest omission is Tears Are Falling. Like I said, and also because of the fact that I've actually heard a performance of it from that tour. Why? That's really all I got to say. Why is that not on there?
Yep. And good call on War Machine. I completely skipped over that. Ken?
Yeah, I agree. Tears Are Falling should have been on there. War Machine, definitely. That was for sure on my list, too. That's got to play. You just got to play that one or put it on the album. The other one, I would have liked to have heard All Hell's Breaking Loose.
Yeah, good call. Good call.
I mean, that would have been a great one to hear live. I love that song. But and I know there's probably a couple others that they could have done. Again, they could have pulled an Alive 2 and put all the newer songs from the 80s and up to 90 or whatever, 92. And then they could have put like a fourth side, well, not a fourth side on a CD, but technically, but they could have added a few new songs on there, maybe just recorded a few new ones just to throw them on there, or unreleased, even unreleased, something unreleased would have been nice. That kind of would have stirred some interest for me, more so than what they did with this production.
Yeah, in case you're wondering why I'm up and down looking, I'm counting up the minutes on the album. I can't remember in '93 what the limits were on a CD, because I know we didn't get to 80 minutes on CDs initially. But Alive 3 without Take It Off is 1 hour and 10 minutes, so 70 minutes, leaving 10 minutes available capacity. With the start. Actually, I'm sorry, without Star Spangled Banner, which I just never saw why the hell that should be on an album. That's released worldwide because, most of the rest of the world doesn't give a damn about Star Spangled Banner. No offense, United States of America, forgive me. So there's plenty of room for those extra songs. And All Hell's Breaking Loose, fantastic catch on that one as well, because, the kind of the importance of that song, again, Eric Carr. And it brings him back into the picture as well. But let's think of, I'd like to try and start wrapping this up with saying something good about Alive 3. What are your favorite songs of this? And I'm going to kick this off, and Lonnie's going to smile, because I think the revenge songs on this are absolutely fantastic. But song number 1, Creatures of the Night, is my top pick off this album. From the get-go, it's everything that Alive 3 should have started out with. Simple as that. Opening track, Creatures of the Night, win. And it sounds good. The performance, while sonically it's not as pleasing on Alive 3, it's still a good performance of the song. I actually like Unholy on Alive 3 more than I do on Revenge. Just how it's performed works for me. So those are going to be my picks. But all of the stuff off Revenge that made it onto the album is decent. So I said something good about Revenge today, and Lonnie can smile all weekend.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah, Ken, what would be your picks on the good stuff?
The good stuff for me, like you said, Creatures of the Night is great off of that. It's a great start to that whole performance. I even like Deuce. That worked well for me on that. Unholy. Not as much. I mean, maybe that works better even on this than in real Unholy in concert, because that one's just never worked fully, for me in concert. Seeing them when I was there, not as much as it did maybe on this performance. And then maybe Watching You is another one I like a lot on this. So those are for me the standouts. I do have Take It Off on mine because I have a vinyl version, which they put the Take It Off on there. But yeah, I think those are pretty much the ones I like.
Mark.
Yes, Well, I think I'm going to agree with everybody else on this. I mean, I think Creatures of the Night is the great opener. I think, to be honest, I think the 1-2 punch of Creatures into Deuce is really strong. I think it's one of the things that I was kind of smiling about when I first got the record. I was like, wow, it started off with a pretty good bang, you know? And I always thought that was a great performance. I thought that Bruce Kulick especially shined on Creatures. I thought he played that really, really well. Probably one of the better performances of Creatures I've heard for a long time. And actually, my other favorite on here, surprisingly, because it's never really been a favorite off of a live when I had it, but I like the version of it on here, is Watching You. I think it's really good. I think it's one of those songs where it benefits from Bruce Kulick's more preciseness of guitar playing, whereas Ace has a little bit more of a looser hand on songs like that. But don't get me wrong, I like Ace's version too, but I think Bruce's is a little bit more technically precise and pleasing to the ear for me. And I really like that version of the song. I think it's one of the definite standout tracks from here. Like you said, I mean, most of the songs on here are pretty good. The only song on here I just don't like the live version of is Unholy, to be honest. I just think because Gene seems to have a little bit of trouble hitting those upper registers live on that song. You know, in the studio, it's easy enough to do it 1,000 times till you get it right, but live is a different animal altogether, right? So, but as a whole, I think, you know, the songs are not too bad on here, but those two are probably my favorite selections. The whole 1-2 of Creatures and Deuce, and then the Watching You is definitely the dark horse favorite for me.
Yeah, and Deuce, of course. I mean, they were performing that live on TV around the time Arsenio Hall, you know, is one of the best ever performances of Deuce. So they were locked in on that in the period. You know, great pick on Watching You as well. I mean, I didn't think of that. And we've kind of turned this into the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's have the ugly. What is your least favorite track on this album, as is Lonnie?
Least favorite album is got to be Forever. I really don't like the version that they put out on that. I understand why they put it out because it was a big hit for him, but I just don't like the way it translates onto the album at all. I think it's really lacking, in my opinion. It just doesn't do it for me. I know that I Was Made for Loving You, that they didn't even play that in concert, but I think that's not too bad in my eyes anyway. It's not too bad, but I think Forever is a next, just a skip over when that comes on. Just not that I dislike the song, I like it on Hot in the Shade, but it just does not translate well onto the live record, in my opinion, at all.
I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I love Forever as a song, and Hot in the Shade. You know, it's really nice. It's very, very nice. But it doesn't stand up when you've got I Still Love You on the same album. The performance of it just does not measure up to the kind of the power and emotion, you know, that Paul pulls into the other song. Mark, least favorite?
Well, I got to give 2 thumbs down for Rock and Roll Night on this one, because personally, if you're going to be doing a record where you're going to be concentrating on other songs and kind of, you know, trying to make it a bit more new material as well. And I mean, obviously, Rock and Roll Night to them in this set list was not probably the big song anymore, because they put it in a smack dab in the middle of the set. Before, this was your closer, and all of a sudden it's right in the middle, and, you know, it's over and done in 2 minutes, and bam, thank you very much. And really, I don't know what they were trying to prove with putting it there in that set by putting it in the middle, but I just don't like it. I mean, I'm so over Rock and Roll Night as a song anyways. I mean, if I don't hear it again for the rest of my life, I'll be a happy guy. But, you know, it's just, I don't know. I just think they could have put something else better in its spot than that. I don't like that.
Ken?
For me, it's a toss-up between Forever or I Was Made for Loving You. Those could have been dropped and replaced with something else. They're kind of different from the rest on there. So, and of course, the Star Spangled Banner.
It kind of just goes.
Nothing against the Star Spangled Banner, but they don't need it on this Alive 3.
No, it's such a shame when we have to qualify not wanting Star Spangled Banner on an album that anyone might think being unpatriotic or whatnot, but I'm not American. Obviously, I do live here, and I do respect it, but I just don't think it's needed. The only time I want to hear Star Spangled Banner is if Jimi Hendrix is doing it, because that's a seminal, performance from Woodstock. So, whatever. All right. Alive 3, any final thoughts, gentlemen, that we haven't covered? Because I'm surprised we're able to talk about Alive 3 this long. To be perfectly frank, I was a little bit concerned that, Alive 3 not being a favorite album of mine is a struggle to listen to. And on those few occasions that I queue up all the Alive albums, or all the live albums, it's really one that I've often found myself skipping through more just because it doesn't sound great, rather than the songs, not being performed well. It's never going to be near the top of my list, because if I take any Alive album, it'll be the original, just because of the material. But any last thoughts, Ken?
Well, while it's not the greatest production, the one thing I'm happy about that when they did Alive 3 is they had the meet and greet at the time going on, and where they, you had to pick up I've told the story before, where you buy the album at the store and they give you a little a pass. It's like a sticker that you peel off and it says Alive 3 pass or whatever, to go meet them. And it was at San Francisco, I think. And so I was, I don't know how many people went, but it was probably about 500, waited in line and walked through the line and shook their hands and got autographs, right? And I put the autograph on. I had the inner fold out of the family tree, or the band's tree, and had them all four sign that. So I still have that. So that, if no Live 3, I wouldn't have been able to meet them at that point, in person.
That's cool.
For the first time. That was the first time. So that was a bonus there for me. So that's the best thing about Live 3 for me.
And much cheaper than it costs to meet them now.
Oh, yeah. That was free.
Doesn't get any better than that. Mark?
Well, like we said, I'm not surprised that we were able to talk about it this long, because I think, frankly, when it comes to KISS, there's always something to say, and usually when you start talking about stuff like this, it just keeps coming and coming and coming, and next thing you know, an hour's passed, right? So, but as far as the record goes, it's not my most hated KISS record by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not anywhere near the top, as we all agree. One of the things that I was, happy about in getting Alive 3 was that when we bought it here, I don't know how it was in the States, but in Canada, when we bought it on the first week that it came out, it came with this really cool poster with Gene blowing fire. It was like a huge poster that came with him just blowing the fire there. And I remember, I think I still have it somewhere packed away in my house here somewhere. But it's, it was always one of those posters that I had donned up in my rehearsal studio with my bands. It was whenever we moved to a new rehearsal spot, that poster was the first thing that went up, boom, right in the middle of the room. And, then you knew it was our rehearsal spot, right? So that's one memory that Kiss Alive 3 has given me. It always makes me think back to my jam spaces that I used to have when we were jamming.
So that's cool, guys. Everyone out there listening, thanks for listening with us today. But, when you go out there and maybe revisit Alive 3 this weekend, chime in on Facebook or on the YouTube page or on the KissFAQ topic that we'll have on this about, what you think Alive 3 should have been, because it's going to vary for everyone. We'd love to hear what songs you think should have been on there. I know we've left out some gems like "Give Me More." Maybe that should have been on. Who knows? Maybe you're one of those people who thinks "Bang Bang You" should definitely have been on that album. So come to either of those three places and let us know what you think. But we certainly thank you all for listening today. And Ken, and Lonnie, and Mark, I thank you for joining me. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we broadcast today. We hope to see you again.